Hey everyone, Jay here. I just wanted to make a quick note about this episode. We recorded this before the murder of George Floyd and also before all of the protests that happened in response to that. We will be addressing that topic in a future episode, but we will not be doing that until we have other voices of people of color, and I think that's just the best way to go about it, addressing that episode. Um, so if you are a person of color, or if you know someone that is a person of color that would be a good fit to talk on this podcast, or if they have any interest in talking on this podcast, please reach out to us on any of our social media accounts because we'd love to hear your voices. Hey everyone, I'm Jay.
I'm Sophia.
And I'm Scott, and welcome to Witches Betwixt.
Today we're going to be talking about saving the world, I guess, in a way. Essentially sharing spells and magic to heal the way that this world is right now, and I guess hopefully create a better one in the future. It can be a very broad topic. It can be a very broad topic. It's a lot to unpack, and it's a lot to tackle. So I don't want to make this seem like this is just in this episode we're gonna fix the world in one episode, but we're kind of just talking about what we as witches, magic practitioners, sorcerers, magicians, whatever label you want to give to your flavor of magic. We're just talking about what we as magic practitioners can do to come together and influence and sort of fix the things that are broken in society, in the world, between humans, between the humans and the planet. So we're just going to start to unpack this, and I think the person of our group that has kind of the most experience in doing this type of work is Sophia, because of all the stuff that you work with DKMU, because it's very along that vein of work that you guys do in that group. So I'm actually going to have Sophia kind of set the stage for this discussion and kind of explain what we mean when we say magic to save the world.
Yeah, and if anything, I'd like to say that this is more like a brainstorming activity than anything. I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
come at this like we have defined and like definite answers because I think that it's really going to depend on everybody who comes together in the end to build this sort of thing. But
Right.
there's been a lot of talk. There's an article that I read the first paragraph of that was called "You Didn't Learn Witchcraft so that you could get a parking space."
Mm,
This one was done a while ago, and it was talking about how um, there's sometimes a tendency in our communities to use our spells towards frivolous means. It's not to say that I've never done a spell to have a parking spot happen. I've absolutely done many spells to change traffic lights to make it easier for me to travel throughout the city.
mm-hmm.
Although that's not the reason I got into magic, right?
It's
I
just
got into magic.
one of the perks that came along with it.
It was actually not even quite a perk. It was a challenge I did
Mm,
to myself to see if I could get magic to act on a causal level and actually get magic by results.
mhm,
It's a very common practice in chaos magic circles to try and do results based magic. So something as tangible as changing a street light is very results based because it provides you an immediacy of evidence of your result, right?
mhm,
Um, so I get it. I'm not gonna like shame anybody who's done frivolous magic because God knows we all have,
mhm,
literally everybody, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, I think that like we all kind of were drawn to it for a reason, you know. And I know for me, when I was young, I really wanted to make the world a better place, and I still certainly do. Um, and I always dreamed of what I could do with magic to make that happen, you know?
mhm,
And then everybody gets into it, and then we all get like these perspectives of, oh, let the world be as it is, you know, everyone should don't interfere with the world. The threefold law will come back upon you. We need to stay removed from it as witches.
mhm,
And we need to be secret. We need to hide. And I've understood that that is very much a mechanism of survival, but it's not necessarily useful anymore. I mean, like, our world's in trouble. Not gonna lie, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We all know that capitalism is a dog shit system that's slowly going to kill us.
mhm,
We know that the old world is dead and dying, and the old Aeon is gone, and the new Aeon has yet to be born. And what the fuck do we want to make out of the world? Like, when it really comes down to it, I learned magic so I could change the world for the better. But that's an abstraction. That doesn't say anything other than make the world a better place, which in and of itself is a subjective concept, right?
right,
So it gets us thinking like, what do you really want to do and what do you want to see happen? And that's kind of why I got into DKMU a lot back in the day, like with the assault on reality and everything. And I've said it many times before, but like the purpose of DKMU at its core is often for most people to change their life and to rebel against a world that doesn't give you space to exist or freedoms to exist, and to empower magic and our ability to use it itself. And that all sounds exactly like everything that every pagan I know ever does.
mhm,
I haven't met anybody who was pagan or Wiccan who was against the idea of empowering people's ability to do magic unless they were on like 32 levels of ego bullshit saying
mhm,
we're like, oh, those people shouldn't have that power because they need to come seek it.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
like a lot of people are really down with what DKMU is trying to do. What scares them off from like wanting to work with us is usually like paradigm differences or
mhm,
like the mouthy motherfuckers online who know next to nothing, who like to just spout off at people, which I would like to remind everybody that those people exist in every single magic group
they
and every
do,
single human group, no matter what. The
mhm,
people who are the good people who run the shit are usually nice, trying to build people up, trying to make stuff happen, trying to connect and network, and they're happy to give you the time of day and talk to you because they're just real fucking people as well, you know? And if you've ever been like kind of steered away from a magical group, like I know I have by Wiccans way back in the day, like I talked about,
mhm,
I understand now that like those people did that because they were insecure. They didn't really know enough to be able to give me information. They knew enough to be able to commit themselves to something and to the act of like wanting to learn it, but to admit to somebody outside of their order that they had not actually attained the state of knowledge would be a hit to their ego. So it's easier to push outsiders away rather than admit that you're still learning, right? It's like that aspect of hubris rather than humility, right?
right,
And I understand that if I asked those questions to a Alexandrian priestess, she wouldn't have ran me off. She wouldn't have ran me off unless she was a fucking transphobe. She would have
mhm,
sat down and had a talk with me. That's what would have happened, right? Just like anybody who's any serious practitioner who isn't trying to do it as some type of ego game, right? And like we were talking about it the other night, like all three of us. And Scott, what was the description that you had for like trad workers, like what they were happy to do? You said something to do with like sit down and have whiskey and chill.
Oh yeah, like I mean that pretty much that. Or I also said and a lot of them sometimes. I mean, it was also sort of said partly in jest, but also partly true. Use flying ointment and go meet the devil, the witch's devil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's kind of like the same shit as what DKMU does. Most of us are happy to like chill out and smoke weed, and some people will get illicit drugs, which we don't explicitly condone, but like everyone's their own person. You can't tell someone not to do something you want to do with their life. So
Mm-hmm.
most people go and do something close to flying ointment, but just of a different substance and chill, and just like tradcraft workers would. And there's like this kind of humbling realization that I've been having lately, that like the only difference between almost any of us is just our fucking paradigms. Practitioners, magicians, and craft workers, generally as a whole, unless like you're some right-wing fascist cult fuckos,
Mm-hmm.
most of us want the same shit: freedom, magic out in the open, being able to live your life dedicated to your craft without needing to hide it, empowering magic itself, giving it avenues in the world to express itself, giving people who are new to the craft and people who have like gifts, like giving them outlets, giving them people to talk to say, hey, no kid who's seeing shit, you're not crazy, come over here, we can like give you a hand with this sort of thing, like
Mm-hmm.
being able to mentor the next generation. We're all about that shit. We just got our different flavors. And I think at the end of the day, we need to understand that like DK and you may be like tiger ice cream, and like Alexandrian maybe like butterscotch, and like Gardnerian Wiccan might be like strawberry, like it's just different fucking flavors.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't there It's still ice cream, it's still fucking magic. And I think at the end of the day that we need to kind of like understand that we really have a responsibility to start coming together as a community of practitioners when we're faced with such overwhelmingly hostile existence. You know what I mean?
I agree. Yeah, I mean, we did kind of discuss this last night in a non-recording kind of way, but this kind of like spawned the idea for the topic of this episode. One thing that I was just kind of thinking of between our last night's discussion and now was, I know we sat down and we all said, most people in magic groups, they want to make they want to make the world more magical. It's like you were saying, DKMU's ultimate goal is to make the world more magical, make the world a more magical place. So I was thinking, I was like, I am very curious, especially for magic practitioners who are more secretive about their craft. I am curious, like, are there magic practitioners on, I guess, I don't know, the other side? Meaning, like, the people who, I don't know if are magic practitioners out there that support capitalism and the way it functions.
Absolutely.
There are, and I call them worshippers of Moloch.
Moloch.
The god of child sacrifice, worshipped since Babylonian times. Essentially, go ahead, please.
He's historically the actual Christian adversary. The interpretation of Satan being the Christian adversary was actually an academic mess up. It was not read. It wasn't correct. Because in Judaism, Moloch would be their adversary, right? It would be their adversarial deity. Which of course in turn would make Moloch the adversarial deity also of Catholicism and Christianity by extension. But yeah, so everything else Sophia said.
And Moloch is essentially a god of child sacrifice. Like people way back in the Canaanite days would sacrifice their children to him in exchange for power, right? And one of the things that the I can't remember who did it, but people who worshipped Yahweh put it into law that it was illegal to sacrifice your children to Moloch at a certain point, right? And if you look at what he represents like the literal worst shit ever. I'm not going to go into all of it on the podcast because
Mm-hmm.
it's like really, 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 really triggering.
But he's like the actual worst.
If you look him up as an archetype, it's literally an avatar for all of the horrible things that have been running our world for the entirety of the past aeon. And he has been worshipped since since Babylon and Canaan in like way early biblical days, like the start of the aeon type shit.
So I think that was kind of like where I was, because I know we were talking about, you know, like sorcerers and magic practitioners coming together to you know, do these kind of deep magics and rituals and spells to, you know, better, I keep saying better the world, but it is subjective, but save the world, better the world in our image, I guess, in our opinion, in our image. But I'm curious, what do you do about those deep magics and rituals that are already in place by sorcerers who support the system as it is?
That is a very long theory working discussion, and you ask it, but it's relevant to talk about, and it's been discussed a lot in DKMU because there's the concept of the assault on reality, which is just actually like a way to put a word on what we're talking about right now, like using magic to oppose the structure of control, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's like numerous methods you can do to approach it. There's like empowering the opposition. So rather than, say, trying to fight all the currents of evil, you can build up positivity if that's the opposite side of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people do this through like light working or like spreading joy and cheer and merrymaking and any type of like forward thinking progressive action that like lifts people up out of squalor and dystopia is the exact antithesis of what that current is, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also the method of attacking it directly. Like in, I think it was Rome, they used to conjure up egregores of a city before they were attacking it and time their attack with a ritual slaughter of that god so that they could ensure their army's success by destroying the thought form behind that city itself and thus not allowing it to enact any defense mechanisms. Um, so you could do stuff like that to directly try and undermine its efforts. There's a lot of things that people have taken for different avenues to approach the assault on reality. Also, like some people want to empower the individual, which I think is a very smart idea because, you know, magic comes from the individual and it isn't just like some out there thing. Like it's a part of us, you
Mm-hmm.
know, it's a part of how we exist in the world. So empowering the person's individual connection and encouraging them into a state of mastery is definitely another way to do it. There's really as many ways as you can think of. Some people like to empower their gods or their deities or patrons, you know, like maybe empowering the green man because or the witch lord or any of those concepts that really stand for like the primal freedom and pushback of domineering society, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that all of those avenues are valid and that restricting what you're doing to fight against it kind of defeats the purpose of having so many different practitioners of so many different paradigms come together to do something, you know? Like it makes sense that like the light workers will build positivity. You can't expect them to be doing bane working, right?
Right.
But you sure as hell can expect people on the crooked path to. They ain't gonna have they ain't gonna have any qualms about, you know, getting out their goofer dust and their coffin nails and
Mm-hmm.
putting some fucking hardcore hexes out on people who need some hexing done on them, you know? And I don't think that trying to centralize any idea uh of like a finite goal beyond like freedom, love, charity, connectedness, like anything beyond like really broad concepts, I think is bound to fail
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't allow everybody their individual way to approach it, you know? Like the people who are like, it has to be done by conflict, and the other people who are like, it has to be done by love. No, it has to be done by all of it.
It
You
has to
got to
be
do
done.
Yes,
That's the
you gotta
thing.
do what you gotta do. And you know what it is. You know what it is, whether it's like running a soup kitchen to help feed the homeless, whether it's like running a media company that gets magical concepts out there and like prints things like the Invisibles, things like that. Whatever it is that you really need to do for you, I think we really got to start encouraging people to do that and start really looking at each other as magical siblings, like we're all in this together. Everyone's been saying it and it's so true, and we are a greater community and there's a lot that we can do, you know.
Hmm.
I agree, and this kind of goes back into what we were saying yesterday about layers of magic to do this type of thing. Like, this is not one of those situations where you cast one spell one time and that's it, and it's just everything's gonna be fine. It's gonna be great. You have to have layers to this kind of work, and I think I'm trying to think. Like, I'm kind of like forming this thought, like as we're having this conversation. I'm thinking like the different layers you would have to have. Like, one, you would have to have a layer, like what you were saying yesterday, Scott, about obscusification.
Hmm.
Do you want to go into what you were talking like a little bit more on that? Like how you were saying like how that's kind of necessary for this kind of work?
Yeah, so to kind of start from the beginning, I was talking, I mean, as far as the practitioners themselves doing this work, I do feel as if a level of glamoury is necessary
Mm-hmm.
for the people who are kind of doing this work to better the world, right? This kind of, I like to call it global magic, is kind of the
Mm,
term I've settled on. Um, so going on is a pretty common theme that you can find in most magical traditions dating way far back. It's actually, this idea of quote unquote invisibility.
mm-hmm.
Um, However, I also think too, kind of deconstructing the obfuscation built around uh people, right? A lot of this current of that we're dealing with, that Sophia is speaking of, deals a lot with I mean, we could see it right now, right? This assault on facts, this
Mm-hmm.
assault on truth. um this and people are eating it up, right? People believe in non-truth and they condemn real truth, the
Right.
only truth, you know what I mean?
They condemn
um
reality.
right. And the idea is that obfuscation needs to be broken, it needs to be shattered, and they need to be able to see things as they truly are. But in this in that vein as well, this also leads me into another form, is kind of a protection magic as well, this kind of creating barriers to kind of make sure that the practitioners and the people involved in kind of this magical, I hate to use this term, but sort of magical guerrilla warfare, if you will,
Mm,
um,
it's fair.
to kind of make sure that we have our own armor. Um, uh, so protection magic is obviously important. Um, Also, too, I would say binding spells, and here's why I want to say this, and this is, and I mentioned this to you both the other day. Um, there's the if I asked you guys if you had seen what is it called? Oh man.
You one of those like fundamental Christian people or something you were saying?
Well, yeah, I was basically how uh I'm trying to remember the name of this movie. I could see it and I cannot remember the name of it. But the gist of it is how powerful ignorance is.
Mm,
How ignorance can be its own magic. Um
Silent Hill.
Silent Hill, thank you very much. The very first Silent Hill film talks a lot about this, as far as how the evil in the film, the quote unquote evil in the film, which is really the ignorance of the church, is actually it was the real evil, but the ignorance kept their version of the evil out, right? It couldn't get in because they viewed themselves as correct. They saw themselves as vindicated, and that, their actions were right.
right.
And it wasn't until it was inside, this symbolic gesture of bringing it inside of their place, and kind of setting a bomb, sort of, right?
Mm-hmm.
The spirit had to possess a person and actually walk into the church. But ignorance is a very powerful form of protection magic. This is why if you're someone who works baneful work, this is why it's really hard to work baneful work on people who don't believe in magic. It takes a longer time. You have to work it longer, especially people who truly don't believe in magic.
Right.
There are a lot of people who say, I don't believe, but, they're the softest target you could possibly go after. But that's just because they secretly fear it, right? But there are people who truly, wholeheartedly don't believe in anything
Atheists.
spiritual. And that ignorance too is also very powerful. So what I'm trying to get at is how do we those people as well need to see the world as kind of
As it is, as it
as
truly
it
is.
is. Yeah, it's not all just science, and it's not all just poetry and art, which I see magic as strongly. I think we need both, and people need to be able to see both, and people need to be able to see the truth of those things. Um, Another thing too is people's ideas, right? Like this current that we're dealing with has created it has choked the hearts of man. They have this inability, this fear of empathizing, this fear of feelings. They think that feelings are the feelings are for the weak.
Mm-hmm.
Feelings are for the people who won't make it. Feelings are for they don't believe that feelings are powerful. They don't believe that feelings are things, and that they could be used for both good and for great harm. And I really truly believe that there needs to be something done as well to understand that people and nature and the earth itself and they ripple out, and we kind of we move each other in sometimes subtle ways and sometimes not so subtle ways. I think realizing that we are both not separate and separate at the same time. We are all interconnected. And I think that this interconnectedness, which, I mean, it's not as if I'm saying anything crazy, right? I mean, like, how
No.
many spiritual traditions, not even magical traditions necessarily, but how many of them teach a sort of fundamental interconnectedness between all people and nature and animals and the rocks and the trees and the moon and the sun? Like, it's almost fundamental in most, mystical and magical traditions.
Yeah, vast majority of them. Vast majority
Yeah.
of them. So I think kind of what you're
Um,
saying, Scott, is probably the first layer to this type of global magic. Like the first layer would be protect the practitioner, right? So protect
yeah.
yourself. Set up
Mhm.
protections and boundaries, because there are and there will be people out there working magic against you. There will be other practitioners working magic against you for doing this type of magic, but also the very things themselves that you are seeking to change or even eradicate will also be working against you
Correct. Yes.
directly.
Hmm.
That's actually something we've encountered in DKMU. Like, certain people in certain parts of the world have gotten like swatted randomly.
Hmm.
And like, not that they actually per se had anything, but like, I can't name names or stuff. But like, when you're doing rituals to actively undermine the power structure, expect the power structure to not necessarily, like, I'm not saying there's like an Illuminati watching you who's gonna fuck with you, but like
Mm-hmm.
naturally the currents kick back. And if you're opposing a god form or an egregore, an archetype like that, it's a fool's game to think that it doesn't have things that it can do in response when you strike out against it. So not to say to not do the thing, but be ready for certain reactions. It's like that law of physics, everything has an equal and opposite reaction, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Not to bring up
Hmm.
the Matrix again, like I always do, but the Matrix, the agents, they are of the Matrix, and they are safeguards in place to keep you in place in the Matrix. You know what I
You
mean?
heard they're
So
getting a fourth Matrix movie, right?
I did hear, and I'm very excited, very excited. Um, I don't know. I think the metaphor of the Matrix really just works for me. It just works. But yeah, it's kind of like that idea that the agents, they are there to keep people in line, and anyone who tries to
Mm-hmm.
challenge the Matrix, well, they get their ass beat. Um, so so that so in terms of this layering of magics, that would be the first thing, is to protect yourself as a practitioner.
Mm.
You need to have that protection, and then, Scott, what you were saying is that next layer would be opening people's minds,
Mm-hmm.
like getting rid of the obfuscation around these systems in place, because I don't I I'm sure that I'm sure that all of us here, even in the audience or just us here in this little group, I am sure that we have all had a moment, or several times we've shared this moment, where you're looking at someone's post online, or you're looking at a video or something that they wrote, and you say to yourself, how can you be like this? How can you be this blind? How can you be this ignorant to
Mm-hmm.
reality? How can you not
Yeah.
understand what is happening? And I think this is and what it is, that ignorance is a product of capitalism. It's a product of power. It's a product of money and status and privilege. It's a product of religion. It's just so many different things that make someone's mind operate the way that it does.
Mm-hmm. There
And
is a lot of psychology here,
mm-hmm,
and that's why I approach. That's why, if you notice, my approach is psychological.
mm-hmm,
As somebody who studies it just on the regular, as somebody who you know continuously forever going to school for it, it seems. It's something that I've realized that, like Sophia said, this archetype, this servitor. Um, that's why I said open people's minds, because it has power, because that is how they operate. The majority of people operate under this current. And the way to break it is to open people's minds. Because the less people acknowledge its presence.
mm-hmm,
Um, that's why, I mean, but in there lies some fundamental hermetic laws, right? Like to know, to will, to dare, and to be silent. This is why, like on social media, there's all these people who kind of like post their spells as they're doing it. Whether
mm-hmm,
those spells are working or not is not what we're talking about here. But the point is, you don't have to always talk about your spells,
mm-hmm,
You don't always have to show off your work. I many times am not allowed to show off my work. The things that they'll let me do are like potions and oils and that kind of stuff.
mm-hmm.
Um,
But I
but
think we might be reaching a point now where it might be time to show our work, maybe some of our deeper work, or at least share the frameworks of our
sharing
other
the framework,
workings.
right? But I mean to say, like, not your personal work, right? Because the thing is, like, that's
Your
another thing. You have to be
Yeah,
smart.
your personal
Because,
craft is your personal craft. You don't want to set up a direct line for someone to come after you.
like, I
I will
remember
say.
there.
Sorry,
Oh,
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, no, go ahead. Go ahead,
Oh,
please.
like there was a witch online who really. This was a couple years ago. He said this, I believe. He has a YouTube channel. This gentleman. I also friends with him on Facebook. Um, uh, I'll leave his information in the notes down below after
Mm-hmm.
this. Um, he one time said, now he didn't say necessarily not to post your altar, but he made a really good point to be careful about it. He said, if in the hands of a witch with the know-how, he's like, can you imagine they print out your altar picture and they use some kind of oil of transformation, right? They use something to turn something from one thing into another.
Mm-hmm.
And they begin to twist and bend your magic into something of their own will, and on your altar, no less. Can you imagine?
Right.
You know, so I mean that has always been kind of a big thing for me. Even though I post my altar, but I'm pretty confident I've never got a warning not to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also too, I would argue that thankfully I don't think many people are particularly interested in doing that. But the point is that they can, and there are indeed people in the community. I mean, I was just in a druid. I'm in a druid group. I don't consider myself a druid. I just like the idea of druid reconstructionism.
Mm-hmm.
And there was people on there making fun of people with very liberal ideas, about equity and equality and healthcare for all. And they were on there like, oh, it's just like you liberals. And this one lady, she was she was she kind of had these horrible fascist ideas about survival during these times. And she was like, those who have quote unquote prepped, she said, will be the ones who survive, and those who have and those who shop in the markets, basically claiming that the only people who will survive are homesteaders. And and sort of preppers and such. And she had other like, she kind of was treating other people as beneath her, is what I'm trying to get at. And this woman was, a practicing druid, and I was like, how is that druidry? I was like, the druids historically were community people. They were for the community, as most pagan traditions were. I mean, even the village witches who lived on the outskirts of town and often looked at suspiciously were there for the people. They were the one giving them, herbal medicines and tinctures and decoctions for rheumatism and colic and, fever and, like helping their bone sprains and shit. Like, that is what they did. Witches are for the people. Even if we live on the fringes, we were magic practitioners, spiritualists, mystics. We were always for the people,
And like, now of all is the worst time for that kind of shit. The whole, oh, those who have not prepared shall perish. Oh, look at me. Like, bitch, those who have prepared have a duty to help other people. Because if not, all you've done is ensured your own destruction. What, you think that you're gonna survive by yourself? Give me a break. We are literally all in this together. If we don't come together to deal with it, the plague's gonna keep raving and ravaging us, and we will be decimated. If we come together and do something, work together, and understand that, like, you have to live locally, you have to, like, take care of the people around you, and understand that you are intimately tied to the environment you live in directly. However, just like everything that's a real deep truth is somewhat paradoxical, you need to also understand you are a global citizen. What you do affects the entire planet on a micro and macro scale. As above, so below. Think locally, or think globally, act locally. Like, these concepts are so immensely true. And we need to understand that we're global citizens, we are members of our communities, and we are representatives of the deities and the paradigms that we work with. Do you really think your God that you turned your nose up at other people during their moment of need, that they provided you boons and gifts and all kinds of charities and exchanges just for you to elevate yourself above everybody else?
Right.
It seems like they would rather disapprove of that, unless, I don't know, you worship some kind of god of selfishness or gluttony.
It's very possible.
I mean, people do.
Yeah, they do. I just think people cherry pick sometimes their own faith systems. And even witches have a tendency to do that too. So no one is exempt from that statement from me, because I've seen it. What was most interesting to me, especially today, because like we had that conversation yesterday, and then we were going to record this particular topic today, and this morning my dad called me like pretty much as soon as I woke up, and he was very chatty today. He was talking to me about like coronavirus stuff and going to the store and no toilet paper and all kinds of that kind of stuff. And okay, so let me give you a little background on my dad. My dad is he's very, work hard, retire. He's retired now. So like, he's like, I worked hard, I retired, this is my life, money's important, you have to provide. And he's very, very blue collar driven in that kind of direction. Also, another thing about my dad, I don't think he is religious to any point. He doesn't really believe in gods. He doesn't really subscribe to anything like that. I would say he is atheist, if he hasn't really just come out and said it, but all signs point to he's an atheist. And he's not really behind the idea of magic and, hocus pocus and stuff like that either. So he's very atheist in his worldview. And he said something to me today that I know if my dad, who is like the most atheist person that I know, he said to me, he's like, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's something weird going on in the world right now. And I was like, holy shit. So
Even the normies can notice.
right. So for someone like my dad, who's very like, not in that realm, it's not his realm of expertise or interest. Even he sees it, and even he feels it. And he felt it so strongly that he felt the need to communicate that to me and saying, I don't know if you noticed, but there's something weird going on in the world. And that just kind of, it really blew my mind, because I was like, wow, if he's sensing it, it had, like, I know that I've been sensing it, but I've had, I have things in place to help me process it. And sometimes I can't process it all. And sometimes I have really bad days and I just can't kind of function. And all you can do is just like watch Netflix and feel sad. But yeah, I think we can all kind of feel that to some aspect. But yeah, so for my dad to say that, it really woke me up more, that there's just something bigger at play here. And it's not impossible to circumvent. It's not impossible it's not impossible to deal with. Because I think back to the binding Trump ritual that can't remember the guy's name who created it, but we talked about it in a previous episode, I think like 2 episodes ago. But like the binding Trump ritual, that ritual was not necessarily designed just for Wiccans. It wasn't designed for witches. It wasn't even really designed for magic practitioners per se. It was just designed to be done by anyone who felt like they wanted to oppose Trump and, him coming to power. It was designed to be done. And the way the ritual runs, you don't really need to be an experienced magic practitioner to do that ritual. And I think that is something in that vein is the type of magic that we need to be sharing. So not just sharing with other magic practitioners, but sharing with the general population. Because I know that there are people out there that, haven't practiced magic a day in their life, but if they're like, oh, if we can light a candle and, recite this phrase to help, like, I don't know, overthrow capitalism or bring down the patriarchy or, sever our social contract with the world or whatever that may be, I think there are plenty of people who would do it. And that, whether they choose to realize it's magic or believe it's magic, is completely up to them, but it is magic. It is 100% magic. And I think having those people join into that type of work is really where that power is going to really come from. Because yes, we have all these magical practitioners, but we are so small in comparison to the rest of the world. And I think by writing these kinds of rituals and spells and things like that, I think it's important to include people that wouldn't normally do magic.
Yeah, I think like far too many people are happy to just be way more secular than is healthy, Like, so many people don't want to reach out with that olive branch and say, oh, what do you want, a bunch of insert practitioner here hanging out with us now? Like, that kind of attitude. Like, it's really prevalent everywhere, and I think that it's outdated. And one thing I wanted to bring up is like, honey, I don't think you've noticed, maybe you have, and I'm not speaking to anyone in particular here, but
Just a general.
look outside. The Aeon is ended. Normal is gone. It's not coming back. We have a choice of what we're going to do right now, how we're going to move forward. The beautiful thing about the Aeon ending like that, is essentially meaning that the old rules of the power structure, they don't have to apply anymore. You aren't bound to anything. You're free to do what you want, right? So what do you really want to do? Like there's all these old laws of we've had to do it this way. When you were talking about how to know, to do, to keep silent, um and how we don't need to do that. In fact, that was the law for the Aeon that we've lived in. It doesn't have to be the law for the future. We can choose those laws together. We can write them as a collective, you know? Like,
Mm-hmm.
we get to decide how we want to live our lives. Let's stop holding ourselves up to the rules that old dead men wrote for us ages ago.
Yeah, and I saw this meme that kind of goes along with that. So the meme was like, I don't know, some like exasperated looking guy or whatever, and it was like millennials living through their second once in a generation economic collapse. And I was like, look, even their own rules are breaking. They're like, because I'm pretty sure they were referencing like now versus 2008. That's when the economy tanked. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, so now even our own rules are breaking. Oh, this kind of recession, this only happens once in a generation. We will not encounter this again, for a long time, for a long, long time. Yeah, well, guess what? It's maybe, I don't know, 2008 was what? How do I do math? 12 years ago, right?
12 years.
12
Yeah.
years ago. 12 years is a second if you're thinking about like global time. You know what I mean? It's not long at all.
You're right.
It's not long at all. And so look, even your own rules that you've established, this can only happen once in a generation. This can only happen once in a generation. This is a fact. This is a tried and true fact. Well, guess what? It happened again.
Mm-hmm.
And what's to stop it from never lifting? What's to stop it from continuing on for a long time? I'm not gonna lie, when this whole COVID-19 coronavirus thing started to affect our economy, like like when the layoffs started to happen and when businesses started to shut down, just before that happened, I honestly really didn't think it was going to have this type of impact, because we had seen viruses pop up before. We had seen like SARS. I think SARS was like the other big one that I remember people were kind of worried about, but not like I think it hit Asia harder than it didn't really make its way over here that much and that strongly. So I was remembering that, and I honestly thought, I was like, it'll be fine, it's just this thing like SARS, like it will affect some people, but it will go away quickly, kind of like how SARS did. It kind of just like faded off. I don't actually remember how it did. I was kind of much younger then, but I remember, everyone was talking about it, and then suddenly no one was talking about it, and then everything was fine, and everyone just kept going on and living their life. But I did not expect this to completely flip our way of life so quickly and so drastically and so powerfully. So I don't know if anyone could have saw that coming. There probably were people that were like, this is big, this is huge. But I wasn't one of those people. I partially kick myself for it, but partially don't, because I'm like, I didn't really know. You know what I mean? I don't have experience in this kind of thing. I've never lived through this. You know what I mean? So I think now I see how much is broken. And I know that there's a lot of people that think like me, and they're like, oh, this was supposed to blow over. Like, I remember talking to my sister, like, she was supposed to get married this weekend. And and I remember talking to her back in like early March, and I was like, she was like, should I cancel my wedding? And I was like, well, yeah, just, you didn't have too much. It was just a brunch. So it was a very small. kind of gathering, like maybe 20 people, and I was like, yeah, you might just want to cancel it, just wait till this blows over. Like, that's the phrase that I kept using, just wait till this blows over, and then, like, maybe you get married in like May, June or something like that, and then you'll be fine. But it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. And I think what this has also shown is that I find it interesting with all these stimulus checks and bailout packages and small business stimulus loans and all kinds of stuff. And it's like, y'all had the money this whole time. Mm-hmm. You had it. You had the funds. You had the power. And you chose not to do anything with it. And now you're giving us a pittance compared to... Because I saw what the bailout packages for like corporations and shit, and it's fucking disgusting. But so you're bailing out the corporations, which you quote unquote think are the backbone of the American economy, and which they are not. It's really small businesses and people, but whatever, fine, I guess. It's just like when this whole stimulus thing came out, I was like, I'll believe it when I fucking see it. You know what I mean? I'll believe it when I see it. So I already have lost faith in the government. I've already lost faith in the people in Washington. I've lost faith in my local kind of thing, like my local kind of leaders and stuff like that. The only one that has actually been good is our governor of PA right now. He's actually been pretty on point with being like, nope, this is closed, we're shutting down, this and that. Like, that's been fine. But I think it's what you were saying earlier, Sophia, it's so much more important right now is to focus locally and apply and magnify our magics globally. Like, take care of our local immediate people, but magnify our power on a global scale. Because that's the only way that anything is going to change and anything is going to get better. And also, I'm not saying that magic is going to cure this virus. It's not going to cure anything. Science will do that. You know what I mean? Like, science will do that. But we can empower science with magic, as we've always done. Just some of us don't think of it that way. But we can empower these scientists. We can empower these people who are working on this vaccine. So
I really do think that magic is a type of science that we just have yet to fully master. However, that's not to say that it's going to save us. It really is going to come down to science and the efforts of everybody.
Yeah. So, but in order to... I just think that we're headed toward a different world, and I keep hearing people saying like, oh, I can't wait till things go back to normal. And, I'm like, I didn't like that normal. I didn't like that normal at all, and that normal has proven that it is fundamentally broken and flawed.
I think that most people who like that normal didn't have it that hard to begin with, and never understood what anybody else was talking about how tough life could be if you don't really have solid income or you don't have the feudalistic style protections that we have right now. Because let's be honest, you trade your work for loyalty to companies and they ensure your health, which is very similar to feudal systems, to how you had to work for a lord to be guaranteed security to live. Sounds very similar, doesn't it?
It does, and especially in this country where our health insurance is linked to our employer, and now 66 million people are unemployed, and guess what? They don't have health insurance anymore.
It's corporate feudalism is what it is.
Yeah, and that is the type of magic that I think that magic practitioners should start working, is to dismantle that system. System and help to find a way to replace it, because it's proven that it doesn't work for everyone.
So I think we should change gears now and start talking about what do we do to fix it on like a practical level. Because we've touched on that a little bit, but we are all kind of getting in on this project idea that I was talking about, where we're gonna write some rituals with friends of mine, because every practitioner has their network of people eventually, and I've been very lucky that networking is one of my skills. So I'm kind of using that to bring multiple people together, and it's kind of like a project that I don't want to say that I'm running, but I'm definitely like
facilitator.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like it's not going to be like a DKMU thing. It's not going to be like a trad witch thing. It's going to be exactly what Jay said. It's a ritual that everybody can do. It's for everybody, for practitioners of every stripe, for people of every paradigm, for people who don't even practice magic but want to get in on the movement of fighting against the establishment that has no real interest in your continued existence beyond subservience and what power you grant to them. We need to band together, and I think that we can write some really good rituals with people that we know, and we will spread that out. Like, we'll put it on our Instagram. I'll be spreading them in all the circles that I do stuff in. So definitely be prepared to see that stuff coming out. I'd love to have y'all working along with it.
Mhm.
That said, don't rely on us. Don't. If you have connections, you can do the same thing. Do it. We need everybody right now to step up and be a leader. There is no one person who is going to carry us through this. That is a myth of an age, long and far gone, called the
There is no
21st or the
Messiah.
20th century. Yeah, we've been waiting. We've been blinded by waiting for the Messiah, and they ain't coming. We have each other though, and we have ourselves, and we can all be the leaders that we need. And we just need to step up and fight together. And I think that's really what it comes down to, is just a willingness to be your own leader and set up. So, like, go out, network with your coven, talk to other covens in your local area, Skype with them, set up Discord servers, start working rituals. If you have personal material that you're not comfortable sharing, find stuff that you can, build something that you can. Now is the time to extend branches to our brothers and sisters who work different paradigms, because who the fuck else is going to do this? Are you just going to wait for the government to come save you? Do you really think that the freedom that you want is just going to get handed to you? You will never be given the tools that you need by the system to defeat it. You have to create it yourself. And there's no better group to kind of lead the charge on it than magic practitioners.
Yeah, I mean, especially because we're already seen as fringe, I guess, in some ways. We're already seen as fringe. So, and a lot of rebellions and resistances have been born out of fringe groups. Um, just like kind of like what Scott was saying earlier. You protect yourself first before you start reaching out and forming these bonds and creating these rituals. There's a level of self-preservation, because if you are destroyed in the process, then we just lose someone else.
Yep.
That doesn't help anyone if you expend all your energy, or you make yourself vulnerable to a point where you can't assist anymore.
And there's a few things that I want to say on that, because that's a really good point. Have you heard the choir theory with social activism?
No.
So, in a choir, how they're able to sustain a long continued note that doesn't break is because whenever you get too tired of carrying the note, you're able to drop out and take as much of a breath as you need. And then you pick up and carry back on. And that's what happens with a choir. You're able to drop out when you need the spoon to recharge and get your breath back. And then you can put your voice back up, and together we can sing that harmonious note that sounds completely unbroken, because we carry the gaps for each other. Everybody is going to need a rest. You can't do that alone. It's the same thing with doing magic.
Exactly. So, definitely having a support network in place. And honestly, right now, like, and I know we keep saying come together, but we don't mean physically, because obviously that doesn't make sense right now, especially because everyone's isolated. But
Please stay home.
Yes, please stay
Yeah,
home.
stay the fuck home.
Yes.
Wash your goddamn hands.
Yeah, stay home and wash your fucking hands. But what we mean is, we just, with our infrastructure and our technological systems in place, I mean, like, we have the ability to come together in a much different way. We can come together faster. I can rally a group of people quicker online than I could ever do just by in person. And be like, oh, everyone come to my house and we're going to do this thing. I could dial up Sophia faster and say, Sophia, do this spell right now with me, faster than I could get Scott to come up from their house up to my house to do it. You know what I mean?
And on top of it, I don't need to do hair or makeup.
Exactly.
I can be in my underwear and a sports bra
Perfect.
in the godforsaken mess that is my room. Yet somehow the only surface that's immaculately clean is my altar. I wonder why. And I can do it. I can be the perfect, ornately dressed mess that I am without anybody needing to see me, and just do it over voice chat with somebody, you know?
Mhm.
Or maybe it's someone who you trust to let see you when you're an absolute mess. You know, those kind of friends who will, spend the night at your house and you're like, you can see the gremlin version of me. It's okay. But don't tell anyone that this exists.
That's how I am too, especially like I know it's a bit of a sidebar, but it's like so it's like kind of like one of the perks of this self-isolation, me being laid off, quarantine business, is I have not had to wear a binder except for leaving my house. And
Yeah,
I am really happy about that because I needed a goddamn break. And so like
tucking is out the fucking window too.
exactly. So it's like it's nice to I don't know, free the titty, I guess.
Free the nip.
Free
Like
the
literally
nip.
tits out, spells cast, you know?
Literally.
Yeah.
Because I often, when like for my personal like stuff that I do, I often won't like wear a shirt or anything like that. Because I'm like, his clothes just feel too.
Just
You know?
wait, we're gonna start getting like full blown for like the new Aeon. People are gonna have ritual pajamas, you know? They'll have like those pajama robes, but they'll have like symbols sewn into it, and like the people who are really crafty will like embroider or bead like sigils into their like pajama robes, and they'll walk around and be like, "Sup, bro?" And
I thought
just
about
have like
doing that
full
before.
ritual robes, but just
I mean, a bathrobe is
comfy,
still
cushy
witchy, right?
pajamas.
It's a robe.
It is. And if you slap like your sigils of whatever you're working with all across it, yeah, it looks legit as fuck.
Realistically, it just reminds me of someone made a film of one of Terry Pratchett's books about Discworld, and it was about Granny Weatherwax and her little coven. They're witches, and in this particular animated film, there's this girl who stumbles across them, and they're away from their home, and they have to summon something, right? And the girl says to them, "But there's nothing here. There's no like magic wand. There's nothing." Well, the one lady says, "Oh please, like we don't need any of that." And basically, like she chants, what does she say? By this sacred brush of cleansing, and the other one has like by this washboard of whatever, and
Oh
then
my
Granny
god, I
Weatherwax
love
holds
it.
up a wooden spoon, and she's like, "By this wooden spoon of art, I conjure you," or whatever, and it works. They have like a iron pot, and it summons the damn thing, and I'm like, yes.
That's actually another thing that got discussed in DKMU a long time ago, was living room floor witchcraft for like people who are poor who don't have altars. Spirits don't give a fuck if you grab a cushion off your couch and use
Mm-mm.
that as an altar, man. They are down for that shit. They're like, look at this person. They have fucking nothing and they're pulling couches, their cushions off their couch to like send me an offering. They're great. Like they eat that shit up, like don't worry about not having the perfect supplies. What matters more is having the perfect gumption to do it regardless of what you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and we've said that before in plenty of episodes. Your tools that's it. They're just tools. You can achieve the same results with all kinds of different tools.
I know somebody who uses like a literal old rusted circular sickle for an athame.
Right, which is just as powerful as a $500 beautiful handmade knife that you buy from some artisan. So I mean,
It's
it's
also got meme power, so you can go, comrades, come to me.
that is also true. I'm trying to think. I think this is kind of a good this is kind of a good place to kind of conclude this and really reel this in. I'm trying to think of like a good way to kind of summarize the message that we've kind of said in this episode.
The idea of world magic is nothing new, but it hasn't been the focus in many years. Magic to heal the earth, magic to empower communities, it has been talked about through myth and legend and folklore and history. We have, in recent times, are going through an age of self-isolation and selfishness, and I don't necessarily mean that fully as a bad thing, because self-isolation gives us reflection, and some selfishness gives us the ability to uh, stand in our own presence, right? It gives us our own autonomy, and it makes us stronger in ourselves as an individual. However, we are in a new age now where it's time to let go of those things. We've had enough time to be selfish. We've had enough time to isolate. And I don't necessarily even mean like self-isolation in the sense of like what we're doing now to stay safe from the virus, but in an emotional sense. We've locked ourselves away, and we've only searched for like fun adventure or vacations, or we've only ever searched for those self-gratifying feelings, those quick fixes, and we've avoided kind of the hard work of feelings, the long-term feel good feelings. I think that it's time to turn our magic back to our communities, and right now there is a big push for people really, magical practitioners really getting out there back into the world. There are organizations doing it, like the Temple of Witchcraft in Salem. And although these people aren't necessarily occultists themselves, but even the Satanic Temple, I mean, they're a sort of a psycho-spiritual community that has wonderful does wonderful things for social justice.
They do a ton of charity work too.
And I think, it's really time to get back out there. When we're able to again, when you're with your covens, or if you're a voodoo sant and you're with your houses, you know, dance for the Loa, ask the horned god, do things, do a circle dance for the earth, give power to the oceans, and give power to the activists, and ask your spirits for of writing and wordsmithing and poetry to give eloquence and to goodly politicians. I think it's time that we exited the world of self-isolation and selfishness, and a time of empathy and compassion. Yeah.
I heavily agree, and I just would like to reiterate what I was saying before. We're going to be doing rituals, hop in on them, but don't take that as the be all end all. Do your own, branch out, make your own rituals to share with people. Start getting your communities together, get your wands, and like make some shit happen. Let's like bring the heavens down. Let's call the other side to here and say, hey, we need some help. Let's re-empower humanity. Let's fucking fight the plague. Let's turn back the people who have been fucking destroying our planet for generations and sowing so much strife and misery that my words could never accurately represent the whole of it. We need to fight that, and the time to do it together has come. And there will be no one person to lead us. It will be a choir, and we will all be singing the same note.
Absolutely. I don't think I could possibly add anything more to those two kind of concluding statements. I mean, I agree with both of you wholeheartedly. I guess the only thing that I would add is just don't over expend or over exert yourself in this kind of fight, because it is a fight, it is a battle. So take care of yourself, make sure that you are well physically, spiritually, mentally, all of that. Make sure that you are well, and if you
Seek
are
help
not,
if you need it.
yes, seek help if you need it. Drop out, take a break, take a breather. But just know that there are others out there, just as Sophia was saying, like there are others out there carrying the note for you, so you can just jump back in whenever you're ready.
We're all in it together.
Absolutely. So I think we're going to wrap up this episode here. I'm just going to do my little outro thing for anyone who is new to us, who has just stumbled across our podcast. If you want to connect with us more, and especially after this episode, you may want to, because we're going to start talking about these rituals and stuff that we're planning. So you can find us on the big three social medias: Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our handle is Betwixt, all one word, on all three platforms. We all check each one except for the Twitter, which is pretty much run exclusively by me. But feel free to message us on any of them and we will get back to you. If you want to add your post to our online community, you can use the hashtag WBTWXT. And the links to our official Facebook group and Discord server, as well as our website, are in the show notes below. And Scott mentioned something else earlier in the episode that I will also put in the show notes.
I will also make sure to link that gentleman's YouTube.
Yes. So we'll have that in the show notes. But for now, be well, take care of yourselves, and we will see you in the next one.
Bye.
Don't forget to banish.